Greetings everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. I've got one last build I wanted to do for the new Rogue Trader expansion, and it's for Idira. More than any other party member, I think Idira really benefits from what Overseer has to offer. Not so much Heinrichs, and you'll see why as we advance through the build, but I wanted to provide this build to you all so you can take advantage of it in your own playthroughs. As always, there's a link down in the description to a build sheet where it lists everything that I've selected for her. I do have a couple of other pieces of Rogue Trader content in the works. I am going to do a video after I finish this current run that we're live streaming to let you know overall how I feel about the Lex Imperialis expansion and where the game stands right now. And then I'm also probably going to update my video ranking all of the different party members. I think considering the fact that we've got Cabela and Solomon, plus some additional content has been added for some of the other party members, it's a good time to revisit that list and see how I feel about it. I don't really have anything else planned for Rogue Trader, so if there's any particular content you want to see, definitely list it down below. With all that being said, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button. If you enjoy CRPG content, you already know I'm going to keep it coming. Appreciate the support thus far. Let's get into the build. All right, now when it comes to Idira, she's got a couple of things that are unique to only her character. First and foremost, she's an unsanctioned psyker, and she is the only person who can pick this. You cannot become an unsanctioned psyker. You can only be sanctioned. Now, the difference is this is going to give her automatically a +1 bonus to her psi rating, which basically makes all of her psyker abilities more powerful. Now, the trade-off is she's also going to have a 5% increased chance to trigger Perils of the Warp, which is going to cause really awful things like pushing your characters around, usually damaging them in the process, summoning demons who will automatically attack your entire team, things of that nature. So it's really ugly when this kind of stuff happens. So having Idira on your team is kind of a high risk, high reward type of situation, but I feel like it's worth it. She's really amazing. Now, the other interesting thing about her character is that she's going to start with 2 different psyker specializations. One of them is divination and the other one is telepathy. This is something else that you cannot do. Your character can only start with 1. She starts with 2, and then you can select abilities from either one. This is very powerful, and we're definitely going to take advantage of it. Now, she is from an Imperial world, a Forsaken Imperial world, actually, and that means she gets a bonus from Humanity's Finest. She's taking it in willpower, so she automatically starts with a +10 in willpower, and that's definitely fantastic for her build. And then the last thing I'll mention is that she does automatically start with 1 ability, and that's Forewarning. So this is going to increase one target's dodge and parry by an amount that scales with her perception bonus and her psi rating until the end of combat. And as you can see, this could be a massive number, and you can retransmission it through the Cyber Raven. We'll talk about that later. Very powerful. All right, now let's get into the archetype mechanics. The first couple of things here is automatically going to be selected, and then you'll be able to start making your own choices. So first up, as an operative, you get analyze enemies. Now what this is going to do is at the start of Idira's turn, it's going to inflict 1 stack of the exploit effect on all enemies in her line of sight. And then if Idira hits an enemy that has an exploit stack, that attack is going to deal additional damage that scales with her perception bonus. In addition, the damage is also going to be increased by 10% for each exploit on the target, and then the attack removes all exploits from the target. So basically, having these exploits on is going to help Idira deal maximum damage. She's not nearly as powerful with this as someone like Pascal is, but it's still nice to have. Now, analyze enemies is both a passive that automatically triggers at the beginning of her turn, and it's an ability that she can manually use. So the manual version of it allows her to target one enemy within her line of sight at an unlimited range, and then she's going to apply an amount of exploits that scales with her intelligence bonus. So this is the reason why she's not quite as great at this as Pascal is, because she's not really going to be touching intelligence. So leaning in heavy to exploits doesn't make sense, but when you can take advantage of it, obviously it's very nice to do so. Now, next up, she's going to be able to take a bonus in one skill, and she automatically takes awareness. Not bad. She's going to be switching off between awareness and lower warp, so this isn't a problem at all. And then after that, she's going to get exposed weakness. Now, this is going to remove all exploits from the target, and then it's going to decrease the target's dodge, parry, and armor by an amount that scales with the amount of exploits removed and her perception bonus until the start of her next turn. Once again, she's not going to play around with exploits all that much, and for characters who do, they're really going to want those exploits on the target, because later on they'll get mechanics that allow them to trigger a bunch of things on enemies that have exploits. So personally, I never found exposed weakness to be all that great, but your mileage might vary. And then finally, she gets a heroic act, this dismantling attack, and it allows her to inflict one exploit on all enemies in combat. Then she's going to make a free attack against that target, and the attack always hits. Until the end of combat, the target of this attack suffers a negative 30% penalty to armor, block, dodge, and parry. I never have her use this. Most of the time, she's going to be carrying a Psyker staff, which has to be used in melee range. Idira should never be in melee range of the target, and so there are other options you'll almost always want to use for your heroic act. Speaking of which, she is going to automatically start with a staff that gives her lightning arc. Now, lightning arc is an Psyker ability that is going to chain to up to 4 targets. So not enemies, targets. You have to be careful about not hitting your party members with this, but all enemies that are within that range, or at least the 4 targets within that 3-cell radius, are going to experience damage that scales with the staff power level, psi rating, and her willpower bonus. And this is extremely powerful. Now, she comes with a version of this staff, and all it will have is lightning arc, but very quickly in the game you'll find a version of the staff that gives you the heroic act version of lightning arc, and this is definitely the heroic act you're going to be wanting to use at first. Now, the advantage of the heroic act version is it's going to chain to up to 6 targets instead of just 4, and it will only chain to enemies. It will not hit your party members, and it deals double the amount of damage that the regular lightning arc does. So just all the way around, this is an incredible ability. You're definitely going to want to take advantage of it, and it's the one you'll be focused on. All right, now from here on out, you are able to select the talents and abilities that Idira takes. So first up, we get an operative talent, and I would take Tide of Excellence. Whenever she triggers an exploit on an enemy, she's going to gain +1 damage and 2% armor penetration until the end of combat. Definitely is going to make her a more effective combatant. And then we're going to be able to take a bonus in a characteristic. No question, you want to start with willpower. It's extremely important to her build. Then we get to take our first common talent, and I would take Stabilizing Factor. The first psychic power used each turn increases Veil Degradation by 2 points less. So again, Veil Degradation is going to count in when the game's determining if you're going to trigger Perils of the Warp or Psychic Phenomena. So you want to keep the instances where you end up accidentally summoning a demon to the absolute lowest amount possible, and Stabilizing Factor is going to help you control that. Next up, we're going to take another talent, and Fresh Target is what I would recommend. Whenever Idira attacks an enemy that is at full wounds, that attack is going to deal additional damage that scales with her perception bonus to that particular enemy. Very nice. Then we're going to take another another bonus into willpower, and then you're going to get to take your first ability. I would take Dominate. Now this forces the target to pass a willpower resistance test with a massive penalty that scales with your psi rating, and if they fail, then on their next turn they must spend all their movement points to move as close to Idira as possible. So this is incredible for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it forces the enemy to try to pass a willpower resistance test. I'm going to have 2 arbitrators on my team, Solomon and my main character, and I will have both of them built up to automatically take attacks of opportunity against any enemy who fails a willpower resistance test in front of them. So that this could automatically double as basically an attack for her, right? And then when it comes to that enemy's turn, if they're still adjacent to those characters, they're gonna move and try to get to as close as Idira as possible, triggering yet another attack of opportunity. And then once that movement is finished, they're gonna have to try to make a willpower resistance test again. And if they just so happen to still be in front of an arbitrator, because remember, arbitrator attacks can immobilize enemies, so that's totally possible. If they're still in front of them, they might trigger an attack of opportunity again. So this is very, very powerful when you combine it with the potential arbitrators on your team. Absolutely, it's great to have. Now, next up, you can take another bonus in skills, and I would actually have her focus on Lore Warp. There's really nobody else on your party member list who is set up to become good at Lore Warp except for Idira. Even someone like Pascal, who has a lot of intelligence, he doesn't have a particularly strong Lore Warp score, and so I really like having Idira be the one focused on it, especially because from a role-playing standpoint, I feel like it's pretty consistent. Next up, we'll take Combat Insight. When Idira's perception bonus is 10 or higher, she's going to gain 1 action point and ignore enemies' deflection. This does not help her at all right now, but it will help her later on, and we're not going to take very many operative talents, so I go ahead and pick it up. Next up, we take Second Sight. So this is going to allow Idira's psychic powers that have a range of 2 cells or more to have their range increased by her perception bonus. This is massive and really helps her to target faraway enemies. Definitely you're going to want this. Now next up, we get to choose an upgrade for Heroic Act, but again, you're never going to use this, so pick whatever you like. And then we'll take another upgrade to Lore Warp, and then after that, Lore Warp is maxed out, so you could take another bonus to awareness. And then after that, willpower has been maxed out, so you could take a bonus in perception. And then we get to choose another talent, ballistics calculation. If the operative attacks a target affected by an exploit from a distance of an amount of cells that scales with your perception bonus or farther, that attack is going to deal 15% additional damage. Great stuff to have for sure. And then next up, we have maxed out awareness and Lore Warp, so I go ahead and take Medikai. And then we get to choose another ability. I would take Prescience. So this is going to provide 1 target with a bonus to intelligence, perception, fellowship, and willpower that scales with your psi rating. And as you can see, it's very considerable until the end of combat. You can retransmission this so that later on you will be able to place it on the entire team. And then for your next talent, I would take Psychomanor. So there's a series of talents, Psychomanors, Majoris, Terminus, and Extremis, that are going to increase your psi rating, and you always want to take these when they are available. So unfortunately, I think this was unlocked a little bit previously, but we would have had to let go of an operative talent in order to get this, so we had to delay it slightly, but it's going to make basically everything that she does more powerful, so you definitely want to prioritize picking these up. And then after that, we'll take Predicted Downfall. The first dodge attempt of every enemy in combat suffers a massive penalty that scales with your psi rating. So this is going to make it much easier to hit a lot of those dodging Xenos you're going to face from Act 2 onwards. Great stuff. Then we're going to take another bonus in Perception. That's maxed out, so we'll take another bonus in Ballistic skill. And then we're going to go ahead and pick up Pain Channeling. Now, this triggers when Idira kills an enemy with its psychic power that deals more damage than the target's wounds. And it takes that excess damage and automatically places it on the next closest enemy. This is amazing and really helps you to target those hard to hit enemies, because that damage is just going to be directly applied. So it's not like it's rolling to determine whether or not the attack will hit. So you can hit very soft targets and destroy them and use that as a way to redirect damage towards enemies that are much more difficult for you to target. And keep in mind, the enemy who this damage gets redirected to does not have to be in your line of sight. So you might take out snipers or faraway enemies that you're not in range of yet, but this damage will still go ahead and eliminate them. Just all the way around, great stuff. Next up, you'll take another heroic act bonus. Again, take whatever you want. And then we are finally finished with operative. So now we can go ahead and move on to overseer. Now, the first thing you've got to decide when you select overseer is what familiar do you want to use? Idira actually has access to 3, but there's no question Cyber Raven is the one that you want. Now, the advantage of Cyber Raven is that it has the warp relay, and this allows her to take single target, non-attacking psychic abilities and relay it to all allies or enemies in a 4-cell radius around the Raven. So a lot of those single target abilities all of a sudden become something you can use to help the entire team. That is absolutely incredible. Now, in addition to that, the Raven also has under surveillance. So the overseer of the Cyber Raven ignores the creature's cover if they're within a 4-cell radius of the Raven. And those creatures cannot block the overseer's attacks using a shield. So all the way around, you are going to be able to buff your team easier, and it's going to be easier for you to deal damage towards other enemies when you have the Raven. Now, like all of the familiars, the Raven does have key characteristics. So it's our agility and willpower, and these characteristics are going to scale with your character level. Now, it also has advanced sensors, which is going to give it a bonus to armor that scales with its agility bonus, and a bonus to deflection that will do the same thing, and its dodge is increased by 20%. Now, like all familiars, it cannot be targeted with extra turns, and it's immune to injuries and trauma, so you don't have to worry about the Raven going down. It does have one inventory slot where you can place something in there, and it will give a bonus to one or both of the key characteristics, and it'll give it some sort of feature that is supposed to enhance what the Raven is able to do. There's a vendor in Dargonis that will sell more of these for you, so you definitely want to check in with him as your profit factor grows. Now, there are 3 abilities you'll automatically get once you select Cyber Raven. The first is relocate, and this allows you to move the Cyber Raven for an amount of cells that equals the familiar's movement points, and it will not trigger attacks of opportunity when doing this movement. So it's a great way to position the Raven exactly where you want. If the Raven goes down, you can go ahead and use reactivate. So this allows you to choose an unconscious familiar in your line of sight within a 5-cell radius, and then it's going to regain an amount of its maximum wounds that scales with your Medikai score. You can do this for other unconscious familiars as long as their overseer is still conscious. So it can be useful to have multiple overseers on your team. And then finally, she'll also get purification discharge. So this allows her to deal an amount of shock damage that scales with your psi rating and the familiar's willpower bonus, and it's going to deal that damage to the 3 closest enemies and a 4-cell radius around it. Can be useful in a pinch. All right, now let's go over the rest of the overseer options. So the first ability I would recommend you take is actually sensory deprivation. Once again, it's going to force the target to make a willpower resistance test, and if they succeed, they're still going to end up blinded, which is going to impose a -30 penalty to ballistic skill and weapon skill, along with a -30% penalty to dodge and parry. Obviously, that's very powerful. If the target fails the test, they're going to be blinded, and they're going to suffer a penalty to all characteristics that scales with your psi rating, and they're going to have to make a willpower resistance test at the end of each turn. So once again, this is going to trigger even more of those amazing attacks of opportunity from those arbitrators, and the character might be significantly debuffed in the process. Next up, you get to take your first Overseer ability, and I would recommend Psi Resonator. When the Overseer relays a psychic power through the Cyber Raven for the first time in a round, they regain +1 action point. This should be happening definitely on the first turn of every combat, if nothing else, and it's really going to help her manage more of her action points, so great stuff. Next up, you automatically get the Overcharge Heroic Act. The Cyber Raven is going to heal to full wounds, and your next 3 Overseer abilities will cost 1 action point less, which basically makes them free for the vast majority of abilities that you would select. The unique thing about the Raven is that until the end of combat, the Overseer can relay attacking psychic powers through the Cyber Raven, and in some situations that is insanely powerful. Keep in mind that Psychic Scream, which I'm sorry, we didn't even go over. Let me go over Psychic Scream real quick. Psychic Scream, and I believe even the Lightning Power. No, not the lightning. It has to be single target. So Psychic Scream will be the main power you could basically relay through the Raven. But imagine being able to use Psychic Scream on an entire team. So it basically is going to deal damage to a single target that scales with your willpower bonus and your psi rating. And this is extremely powerful. Plus, you're going to have multiple talents that directly interact with mental damage, which is what this does. So it's really, really cool to be able to chain it through the Cyber Raven and hit a bunch of enemies at the same time. But also keep in mind, this heroic act is going to be at its very best when enemies are still tightly clumped together. So if you don't get this until much later on in the battle, and you might have 4 or 5 enemies, but they're all in these separate places, this heroic act isn't going to assist you nearly as much. So you kind of have to weigh whether or not it's worth turning it on, but no question, it's super, super cool. Next up, you're going to get a bonus action point, which obviously is very, very nice. And then you're going to be able to increase your characteristics once again. I would recommend you start with willpower. Next up, you get another talent, and I would take Rite of Calibration. The first use of an Overseer's ability in combat costs 1 action point less. Oftentimes, you're going to need to move your Raven in order to get it to the best position so that you can buff the maximum amount of allies. And this talent is going to ensure that you can do that for free. Very nice. After that, go ahead and take another bonus to willpower. And then next up, I would recommend for your ability, you actually go ahead and open up Biomancy, which is going to give you access to more buffs, including Iron Arm. So this is going to allow one target to gain a bonus in strength and toughness that scales with your psi rating until the end of combat. As you can see, the bonus is massive. So this is really, really nice, especially if you have melee party members on your team. Next, after that, we can take another bonus in Lore Warp, and then we're going to take Warp Buffer. If the Overseer is within 4 cells of the Raven, whenever the Overseer triggers perils of the Warp, it affects a random enemy inside that area instead of the Overseer. If there are no enemies in this area, perils of the warp affects the Overseer as usual. No question, that's amazing. It could really, really help you in a right situation. Definitely you want to pick this up. And then next up, we've maxed out willpower, so we'll go ahead and start taking bonuses in perception. And then we have another increase in psi rating that we can get, so go ahead and pick that up. And then we want to go ahead and get bound by warp. Enemies in a 4-cell radius around the Cyber Raven have their willpower reduced by an amount that equals twice the Raven's willpower bonus. Obviously, anything you can do to damage enemies' willpower is going to make it easier to land those debuffs on them. Very nice stuff. Next, we take another bonus in perception and another bonus in Lore Warp, and then we get our first heroic act upgrade. Now, again, how often you use this is going to vary. In my current playthrough, I'm in Act 4 and I've never used this before, but you may find it a little bit more useful depending on how you're utilizing Idira. If you're using her a lot for damage and want to take advantage of this, I would probably start with the first upgrade. Whenever the familiar becomes the target of an enemy's attack, the overseer has their damage dealt increased by 2%. The effect stacks and lasts until the end of combat. Cool stuff. And then we're going to take Castigating Echoes. The effect of psychic powers relayed through the Cyber Raven is calculated as if psi rating were increased by 1. Awesome stuff. And then we're also going to take Obscure Threat. While the Psyker is not in the target's line of sight, or the Psyker is in cover, which you pretty much always want Idira to be in cover, all resistance tests of the target is going to suffer a penalty that scales with your psi rating. So this is again going to make it much easier to land those debuffs that you've taken and really debilitate enemies and trigger those area of effect attacks that are going to absolutely wipe them out. Next up, you've maxed out willpower and perception, so go ahead and start on ballistic skill, and you've maxed out lure warp, so go ahead and take a bonus in awareness, and then take your first biomancy ability, enfeeble. Until the end of combat, all targets within the area are going to suffer a massive penalty to strength and agility that scales with your psi rating bonus, and they're going to experience additional incoming damage that scales with your psi rating bonus. No question, this is a really big time debuff, but keep in mind it's all creatures within the area of effect, not all enemies, so you can hit your party members with this. You want to be very careful not to do that. Next up, we're going to take Enhanced Augmentics. It's going to add +5 to the key characteristics of the Raven. Very nice. And then we're going to take yet another bonus to the psi rating of Idira. Obviously that's going to make it more powerful. Take an increase in ballistic skill, take an increase in awareness, and then we want to take biophysical disruption. All of the Psyker's attacks, including attacking psychic powers, are now going to poison enemies, and this poison damage is going to scale with your psi rating. Very nice. It's going to make her hits land even harder. On the next turn, you want to go ahead and get Mind Siege. Enemies that have failed a willpower resistance test against your psychic powers will now suffer an additional amount of direct damage that scales with your psi rating every time they suffer mental damage. So basically, you always want to start with a debuff and then hit them with something hard, and this will make sure that it hits them even harder. Absolutely, this is great stuff to have. And then you can choose your final upgrade for your Rogue Act. I would get the last one. Whenever the Overseer uses Reactivate, the momentum value is increased by +5 for each party member still in combat. I take this because if you've taken this heroic act, that means having the Raven up is important to you. And if the Raven goes down, you probably want to get it right back up. And so this is going to help ensure that you get a little something back if you decide to go ahead and do that. All right, that is everything for the first two archetypes. So now we're finally at Exemplar. One more time, I'll remind you, there is a sheet down below with all the options listed out. And I want to take a moment to thank everyone who has been supporting the channel, whether you're a Twitch member, YouTube member, or signed up for my Patreon. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you. Definitely planning to continue coming with great CRPG content. Let's go ahead and get into the rest of the build. First and foremost, you're definitely going to want to take Malign Influence. Whenever an enemy fails a willpower resistance test against the character, they are going to suffer direct damage that scales with your willpower bonus, and on success the damage is doubled. Great stuff. She'll trigger this all the time. Next up, you're going to want to take Deterioration. Whenever an effect applied by the Psyker increases the damage suffered by a target, this effect is increased by half, so it's going to make your Enfeeble ability that much more powerful. Next, you're going to go back to take an increase in Lure Warp, and then you're going to take Mental Breach. Enemies that have taken damage from you at least once suffer a -20 penalty to all resistance tests against you until the end of combat, once again ensuring your debuffs actually land. Next up, take an increase in Willpower, and then we're going to take Power Conduit. After triggering Psychic Phenomena or Perils of the Warp, which by this time in the game is probably going to happen all the time, for the first time each turn, the Psyker's next psychic power costs 1 action point less, ensuring it's going to be even easier for you to hit with those damaging powers. And then we're going to take another Biomancy ability, Warp Speed. Until the end of combat, one ally is going to have their movement points and their agility increase by an amount that scales with your psi rating, and their action points are going to increase by 1, and you can give this to the entire team. That's insane. Definitely you want to pick it up. And then next up, you want to go ahead and take Death Dealer. When Idira kills an enemy for the first time in a round, she's immediately going to make an additional attack against the closest enemy that she can target with the same weapon if possible, using whichever attack costs the least action points. So it basically can allow you to get 2 mental shrieks out at one time. Hey, I'll absolutely take it. Next up, we'll take her very last bonus to psi rating. Great stuff. And we'll take another bonus to willpower. Then we'll take Thriving in Peril. Every Perils of the Warp, which I already mentioned you're going to be triggering all the time at this point, is going to increase momentum by an amount that scales with your willpower, resolve, and psi rating. So at least get something out of it if something bad happens. Next ability I would take is Invigorate. This is going to restore a pretty decent amount of wounds that is going to scale with your psi rating and willpower bonus. And then if this ability brings the target to full wounds, it's also going to remove all stunned, bleeding, fatigued, blinded, immobilized, staggered, and fresh injury effects from the target. So this is a great way for her to basically serve as someone who's not only healing the team, but also taking off some nasty status effects. Keep in mind that she can heal the familiars as well. So if the dog so happens to be stunned or something like that, she can go ahead and help it out. Next up, take a bonus to perception because you've maxed out the bonus to willpower. And then take Fatebringer. Allies under the effect of at least 1 psychic power, which the entire team should be under the effect of our powers, are going to have their armor penetration increased by a massive amount that scales with her psi rating. Great stuff. And then we'll also take Aftershock. Every time the psyker deals mental damage from any source other than Aftershock, the target suffers half as much mental damage at the end of their next turn. This is a great way to trigger some additional damage on bosses with massive health pools that is going to take some time for you to whittle through. And then next up, you've maxed out the bonus you can take at lower warp, so go ahead and move over to awareness. And I will go ahead and take Cataclysm. All damage dealt by the character is increased by 3% until the end of combat for every new enemy damaged by them this combat. And then finally, take the bonus in action points. By this time, you are an absolute monster and you can take whatever you want going forward. And then last, I'll go over her gear. Now, this is based on a playthrough where I haven't actually finished the game. I'm only at the beginning of Act 4. So there's definitely some really nice options that I haven't run into yet. You will most certainly be able to set her up with gear that's even better than this, but it gives you a good idea of what you should be going for. So for the head slot, I have Ethereal Visor, which is going to increase her psi rating by 1. And as long as she has 100% wounds, her damage using psyker abilities is going to be increased by an amount that scales with her willpower bonus. Obviously, that's extremely powerful and nice to have. Then she has a necklace that gives her immunity to the Horrors of the Warp effect. This isn't all that great. Horrors of the Warp isn't something I really worry about, but I haven't found a better necklace for her, so I'm still wearing it. For her light armor, it gives her 38% armor and, more importantly, 10% dodge against human enemies, along with a plus 10 bonus to agility, which in turn is providing more dodge as well. She doesn't have very much dodge, so it's nice for her to have this. And then probably the most important thing on her entire gear list is the Spirit Drape. The wearer's non-attack psychic powers cost 1 action point less during the wearer's first turn in combat. What this allows you to do is take all of those amazing buffs we've already talked about and land all of them for the entire team on your first turn, as long as people are positioned properly. That's insanely powerful. And she can still attack after she does that. Great stuff. No question you want her to have this. After that, we also got Commander's Chrono. The wearer always has the highest initiative in combat. I want Idira going first so she can buff all the party members before they run out and start attacking enemies or doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Now, the disadvantage of playing that way is that at the beginning of combat, my folks are going to be tightly bunched, right? Which technically makes them vulnerable to area effects or attacks that enemies deal, but their stats are so buffed by what she's done that it kind of levels things off and usually isn't a problem, but we'll see how it goes as the game progresses. Next up, we have the gloves. After triggering a psychic phenomena or perils of the warp, her psi rating is increased by +1 until the end of combat, and she gains momentum and temporary wounds equal to her resolve. So this is another way to make her even more powerful. The cape is going to give her a reduction to incoming damage that scales with veil degradation, which is going to go sky high because she uses a ton of powers. And then the boots is going to allow her at the start of her turn to gain 20% increase to dodge until the end of the round. Usually combat doesn't really go past the second round in Rogue Trader, so this is a massive defensive boost. And then finally, of course, we have the charged staff, which I already mentioned is going to give lightning arc along with the heroic act version of lightning arc, and it's going to give a +10 bonus to willpower. And that's it. That's my full build for Idira. Again, this is the last build I probably plan to do for the expansion. Heinrichs obviously is also a psyker, but he's much more focused on attacking, so I don't think he gains nearly as much out of Overseer as Idira does. In fact, you could probably make the case that Assassin is still the best option for him. But for Idira, I think this is amazing. And I also frankly think you can make the real case that she is at least equally important to the team now as Cassia is. Cassia is not head and shoulders clearly the best party member on your list anymore. Some of you might disagree, but I think the fact that she can just land all those buffs for your entire team and make you damn near unstoppable is really, really freaking cool. Anyway, that's the video. Again, let me know down in the comments if there's any other particular content for Rogue Trader that you're looking for. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button. I appreciate the support. I'll see you on the next video. Take care.